You will sign that paper tonight, or you will never set foot in this house again. My stepfather's voice didn't rise. It never did. That was the thing about him. He didn't need volume. He had a way of saying the most devastating things in the exact same tone he used to order coffee. Flat. Final. Like the matter was already settled and he was simply informing me of the outcome. The dining room smelled like roast lamb and red wine. My mother had lit the good candles, the tall ivory ones she kept in a box in the pantry, and only brought out for company. I suppose I counted as company now. I hadn't been back to this house in 14 months. My half-sister sat across from me, her fingers wrapped around her wineglass, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. She wasn't trying to hide it. She didn't think she needed to. The paper on the table was a transfer of beneficial interest, my grandmother's trust, the one she had set up specifically in my name, for my protection, before she died, transferred in full to a numbered holding company my stepfather controlled. His lawyer had drafted it. It was clean, airtight, and entirely designed to make sure I walked away from the only inheritance my grandmother had ever intended me to have. I looked at it for a long moment. I picked up the pen. My half-sister's smile widened. My mother exhaled, slow and quiet, like she'd been holding that breath for weeks. My stepfather leaned back in his chair. I set the pen back down. "I'm not signing this," I said, "before I tell you what happened in the next 20 minutes, and why 2 RCMP officers and a federal investigator were standing in that dining room by the time dessert would have been served. I want to ask you something. Have you ever sat across the table from someone who raised you and realized very clearly that they had been planning this for years? That the warmth, the birthday cards, the occasional phone call, all of it had been maintenance, the minimum required to keep you close enough to use? Leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is something I've never said out loud before, and I need to know someone is listening. My stepfather's name wasn't on my grandmother's trust. Mine was. It had been that way since I was 11 years old, when my grandmother sat across from her own lawyer in a quiet office in Burlington, Ontario, and made sure that whatever happened, whatever my mother did, whoever she married, I would have something that was mine. The trust held a piece of commercial property in Hamilton, nothing glamorous. A 2-story brick building on a side street, the kind that anchors a neighborhood without anyone noticing. She had bought it in the 70s with money she'd saved working as a bookkeeper. She never told anyone about it. Just me. "You'll know what to do with it," she told me the last time I visited her in the hospital. She pressed my hand between both of hers. "You always knew how to see what things were worth." She died when I was 22. I was in my second year of a business degree. I was paying for myself, working 2 jobs, eating a lot of rice and frozen vegetables. My mother and stepfather flew in for the funeral in matching coats and spent most of the reception talking about the estate. They didn't know about the trust until the lawyer called. My stepfather's reaction, I wasn't there for it, but I heard about it from my aunt, was very quiet, like his voice always was. He just nodded slowly and said, "We'll figure it out." I didn't understand what that meant until tonight. I looked at him across the candlelit table. "I'm not signing anything." "You're being dramatic," my half-sister said. She was 3 years younger than me, her mother's daughter in every way that mattered. She had my stepfather's confidence and my mother's talent for reframing cruelty as practicality. "It's just paperwork. The property's been sitting empty for 2 years. You're not doing anything with it." "That's not the point." "Then what is the point?" she asked. "That you like knowing you have something we don't?" "The point," I said, "is that it was left to me." My stepfather unfolded his hands. "Your grandmother was a sentimental woman who didn't understand tax implications or estate planning. What she set up has been a liability for this family for years. We've been managing it, paying the property taxes, keeping the insurance current. You haven't contributed $1. That wasn't true. But I didn't correct him then. I had a reason for that. "Sign the paper," he said. "We'll give you $30,000. You can pay off your student loans. Everyone walks away clean. 30,000. The property was worth considerably more than that. I knew because I had looked into it, carefully, quietly, over the past 8 months, after I found out what he'd been planning. After a contact of mine flagged an unusual application filed with the City of Hamilton related to a rezoning proposal. The applicant was a numbered company. The beneficial owner, buried in the corporate registry, was my stepfather. He had been applying to rezone my grandmother's property for high-density residential development. The parcel, in the current market, with that zoning change approved, would be worth somewhere in the range of $4 to $6 million. He wanted me to sign it over for 30,000. I reached into my bag. "I'm not signing," I said again, "but I did bring you something." I pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the table between the water glasses and the lamb. My half-sister looked at it like it had appeared from nowhere. My stepfather's jaw tightened, barely visible, the only tell he had. "What is that?" he said. Not a question. "Open it." He didn't move. My mother reached for it first, that anxious reflex she'd always had. Smooth things over, soften the edges, contain the situation. She slid out the papers inside and looked at the first page. I watched her face go from careful blankness to something I hadn't seen on it in a long time. Fear. "This is," she started. "That's a letter from my lawyer," I said, "informing you that as of last Thursday, the beneficial interest in the Hamilton Property Trust is no longer transferable under the terms of the original agreement because the trust has been restructured. I had a very good estate lawyer look at it. Turns out my grandmother's original language gave the trustee, that's me, the right to amend the trust structure without consent of interested parties, so I did." My stepfather's hand was very still on the table. "The property," I continued, "is no longer held in a personal trust. It was transferred last week to a federally incorporated holding company, my company, Lakemere Capital." My half-sister made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "You don't have a company." "Check your phone," I said. She rolled her eyes, but she picked up her phone. I watched her type. I knew what she would find. The Canada Business Registry listing, filed publicly, Lakemere Capital Incorporated, sole director and shareholder, my full legal name. She put the phone face down on the table. "That's not all," I said. "Lakemere Capital has been busy over the past 6 months while you were filing rezoning applications for a property you don't own. I was doing some research. The numbered company you used for the application, 2021 DO and 20O Inc. I traced the corporate chain. It connects to a holding structure your accountant set up in 2019, the same structure that receives rent payments from 3 commercial tenants in Mississauga." My stepfather's expression hadn't changed. That was almost impressive. "The problem," I said, "is that those rental income streams have never appeared on a personal tax return. Not yours. Not the corporation's. I had an accountant review the filings. 4 years of undeclared income. CRA takes that very seriously." "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said quietly. "I also talked to the city planner," I said. "The rezoning application was filed with a statutory declaration confirming ownership of the parcel. You signed that declaration. The parcel was not yours to declare." "That's a false statement in a legal proceeding. In Ontario, that's an indictable offence." My mother was crying now. I don't think she even realized it had started. She had a way of crying that looked like something happening to her, not something she was doing. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is your family." I looked at her. 14 years ago, I was 18 years old, sitting in the kitchen of the townhouse we rented after my stepfather moved in, and my mother let our old house go. I'd been accepted to a business program and the master. I had a partial scholarship and a plan to cover the rest with the money I'd saved from 3 years of working weekends at a garden center and evenings at a restaurant. I had $9,400 in a savings account. I had shown my mother the acceptance letter the week before. She had hugged me and said she was proud of me. Then one afternoon, I came home from a double shift to find her at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. She told me she needed help. My stepfather had co-signed a business loan for my half-sister's father, an ex she had stayed in contact with for my half-sister's sake, and the loan had gone bad. The lender was threatening to come after my stepfather's personal assets. She said they needed $8,000 to make the payment current. She said it was a temporary bridge. She said she would pay it back before September. She looked so small sitting there. She had that face she got when she was genuinely afraid. I knew that face. I transferred her the money the next morning. I deferred my enrollment for a year to save up again. The year turned into 2 years because my stepfather lost his job and money was short, and my mother needed help with the power bill in January and the car insurance in March. I watched my half-sister start university on a student line of credit. My stepfather co-signed without hesitation. I started McMaster at 21, 3 years late, with less money than I'd had at 18. I paid for every semester myself. My mother came to my convocation. She brought flowers. She told her friends I was always so independent. She never paid back the $8,000. I stopped expecting her to around year 3. I looked at her now, at the good candles and the roast lamb and the careful staging of a family dinner. This is your family. That's what she'd said. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Clarity. I know, I said. That's exactly what I'm counting on. My stepfather pushed back from the table. I don't know what you think you're doing, he said, standing, but I will call my lawyer right now, and we will tie your little incorporation in knots until you don't have a cent left to your name. You want to play games? Fine. Let's see how long your company survives a legal challenge. Sit down, I said. Something in my voice made him pause. Before you call anyone, I said, you should know that Lakemere Capital's corporate structure includes a discretionary trust with 4 beneficiaries. I'm one of them. I paused. The law firm you just threatened to call, Hadley Marchetti in downtown Hamilton, is also one of them. Specifically, the managing partner. He holds a minority stake in Lakemere as compensation for 3 years of legal advisory work. Silence. He's been my lawyer since I was 23, I said. He reviewed every document your lawyer sent me over the past 2 years. He flagged the rezoning application. He helped me restructure the trust. When you call Hadley Marchetti to threaten me, you will be calling my business partner. My half-sister stood up. This is insane, she said. You're lying. You've been working retail. You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Civic. I drove a 10-year-old Civic, I said. I sold it last year. I take the GO train now. It's better for the commute. I looked at her steadily. The retail job was contract consulting, supply chain optimization for a distribution company. That contract paid me $180,000 over 18 months. Lakemere's current portfolio, the Hamilton property plus 3 other acquisitions, is valued at just under $8 million. She sat back down. I opened the second section of the envelope. This is a formal complaint filed with the CRA last Tuesday, I said. The reference number is on the top right. This is a copy of the statutory declaration review request filed with the City of Hamilton's Integrity Commissioner, and this, I slid a third document across the table, is a notice from the Ontario Securities Commission. The holding structure your accountant designed appears to have been used to facilitate a securities transaction in 2021 without proper disclosure. That one, I'll be honest, I'm not sure how it resolves. But the OSC investigator I spoke to seemed interested. My stepfather looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. For the first time in my life, he looked uncertain. We can fix this, my mother said. Her voice was different now, smaller. Whatever we need to fix, we can sit down and you can't fix a CRA complaint once it's filed, I said. And I don't want to fix it. My stepfather's hand moved to his jacket pocket. I thought he was reaching for his phone. He was. He dialed. I heard it connect. Graham, he said into the phone, turning slightly away. I need you to put it on speaker, I said. He ignored me. I said, put it on speaker. Something. Maybe the steadiness of my voice, maybe the stack of documents on his dinner table, maybe something he saw in my face made him hit the button. Graham, it's me. I have a situation. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the edge in it. My stepdaughter is here making some claims about. Which stepdaughter? The voice on the other end said. Genevieve. There was a pause on the line. Then, I can't help you with anything related to Genevieve. I should have told you this sooner. I need to recuse myself from anything involving her or Lake Mere Capital. I'm sorry. I'll explain when I can. The call ended. My stepfather stared at the phone. Graham Hadley has been my lawyer for 5 years, I said quietly. Did I not just tell you that? The room was very still. The candles threw soft light across the table, across the half-eaten lamb, across 3 faces I had known my entire life and was seeing clearly for the first time. My half-sister broke first. You can't do this, she said, her voice cracking. The wedding is in 4 months. If there's some tax investigation, if this gets out. I know about the wedding, I said. I know the venue deposit is $22,000, already paid. I know the venue is a restored heritage property just outside Ancaster. I know this because Lake Mere Capital acquired that property in December. She went white. I'm not cancelling your wedding, I said. I'm not that person. The booking stands. But going forward, the property is mine. And you and I are going to have a very different kind of relationship than the one we've had. I stood up. My mother reached for my arm. Genevieve, please. I stopped. I looked at her hand on my sleeve. I thought about the $8,000. I thought about the $8,000. I thought about the convocation flowers. I thought about my grandmother in that hospital room, pressing my hands between hers, telling me I knew how to see what things were worth. She wasn't wrong. I don't hate you, I said to my mother. I want you to understand that. I don't hate any of you, but I spent 10 years making myself small so you could feel comfortable. I deferred my life so you could maintain yours. And when I stopped being useful, you tried to take the one thing my grandmother left me. I picked up my bag. I'm not angry. I'm done. I walked to the hallway. I heard my stepfather's voice, slow and controlled, already calling someone else. He shouldn't have done that. My phone buzzed as I reached the front door. A message from the RCMP financial crimes liaison I had been in contact with for the past 3 months. She and a colleague were in the neighborhood as we had arranged, waiting on my text. I sent 3 words, "Come in now." I opened the front door. 2 RCMP officers in plain clothes and a woman from the Federal Financial Crimes Unit came up the front walk through the cold November air. The porch light caught their breath in small clouds. I stepped aside to let them pass. "Ms. Tremblay," one of them said. "Inside," I said. "They're all there." I stood in the doorway and listened to my stepfather's voice change register for the first time in my memory. I didn't go back in. I didn't need to watch it. I had spent years imagining this moment, and now that it was here, I felt almost nothing. Not satisfaction exactly, more like the particular quiet that comes after you've been carrying something heavy for a very long time and you finally set it down. My half-sister called me 47 times in the 2 weeks following that night. I answered once, on the 3rd day, to tell her the venue booking was still intact, and she could speak to my assistant going forward about anything related to the property. My stepfather's tax matter is ongoing. The statutory declaration issue has been referred to the Crown. I don't know how it ends. That part isn't really mine to control anymore. My mother sent me a card at Christmas. Store-bought, a cardinal in the snow on the front. Inside she had written, "I hope someday you can forgive us." We were in over our heads. No mention of the $8,000, no mention of the trust. No mention of the document she had watched her husband slide across the table at me over roast lamb and good candles. I put the card in a drawer. Maybe someday. Not today. My grandmother's building in Hamilton is still standing. I had it refurbished this spring. New windows, repointed brickwork, a local bakery took the ground floor unit. I walked through it on a Tuesday morning when the light came in sideways and turned everything the color of old photographs, and I thought about her, about what she saw when she bought it in 1974 with money she'd saved herself, with no one helping her, in a city she'd moved to with 2 suitcases and a plan. She knew how to see what things were worth. So do I. There's a moment, somewhere in the middle of that dinner, where I looked at my mother's face and understood something I had been circling for years without being able to name it. She genuinely believed she was the reasonable one. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the money, not the property, not even the document they slid across the table at me like I was a stranger at a closing. It's the fact that she sat there and truly believed the story she was telling herself, that they had been carrying me, managing things on my behalf, that asking me to sign was a kindness, that I owed them the grace of compliance. That's what cruelty looks like when it's been practiced long enough. It stops feeling like cruelty to the person doing it. I think about the 18-year-old version of me sitting at that kitchen table with the transfer confirmation on her phone. $9,000, 3 years of weekends and double shifts, saved in a jar with a plan attached to it. I gave it away because I couldn't bear to see my mother afraid. That wasn't weakness. I want to be clear about that because for a long time I told myself it was. It was actually the most decent thing I knew how to do at the time. The problem wasn't that I was decent. The problem was that I gave that decency to people who read it as a resource. What changed wasn't me becoming harder. I don't think I'm harder now. What changed was that I started paying attention. I went back to school. I read everything I could find about corporate structure, about trusts, about how money actually moves and who controls it and why. I asked questions that made people uncomfortable. I built things slowly, quietly, without announcing them, because I had learned early that announcing things in my family meant having them taken. The intelligence I developed wasn't the flashy kind. It was the kind that comes from sitting with a problem for a long time and refusing to look away from it, and then I waited. Not out of strategy at first, just out of necessity. But somewhere along the way, patience became its own form of power. My stepfather had spent years assuming the gap between us was fixed, that I would always be the stepdaughter with the 10-year-old car, and the studio apartment, and the deferred ambitions. He never once considered that I might be building something he couldn't see. That's the thing about underestimating people. It makes you careless, and careless people leave records. I'm not telling this story because I want anyone to admire me. I'm telling it because I needed to understand it myself. What I carried out of that dining room wasn't triumph. It was something quieter, a kind of integrity that comes from not becoming what was done to you. My stepfather chose fraud. My mother chose complicity. My half-sister chose the easier inheritance, the one that didn't require her to question anything. I could have made those same choices at different points. There were years when bitterness would have been completely understandable. I chose differently, not because I was better, because I was paying attention to what those choices actually cost. You can watch what carelessness and dishonesty do to a person over a decade. You can watch it hollow them out. I watched it. I took notes. My grandmother bought that building alone, with saved money, in a city she moved to with 2 suitcases. She didn't have anyone co-signing for her. She just kept going. She left it to me because she recognized something. I think she recognized that I would keep going too, even when it would have been easier to stop. She was right about that. And that, more than anything, is the inheritance that actually mattered.